I finally did it. I've become an actual novelist. No longer, an aspiring, I'm working on it, I'm trying to finish a novel. Early last month, I finished my first novel, which is not my first attempt at a novel by a long shot. Before I started a story called The Legion, I already had done a bunch of attempts at novels that all died. And each time I was really excited at the beginning, and I spent a bunch of time planning it, and it just died. And then The Legion, I got really far, and then it died. Because I switched to a different idea, which then died. Because I switched to this idea, because that idea, the second idea came from The Legion, and then from that idea, then came the novel that I have currently finished, a fantasy novel titled Stormhawk. And to give you all basically an overview of what Stormhawk is, and this particular plot is very difficult for me to explain succinctly in a manner that actually doesn't sound stupid. So I'll do the best I can. So there's this guy from this country called Braum. His name's Kiersey. He is the son of what is known as a Stormhawk. Is basically a priest. They get their magic powers from a bird. I know it sounds really stupid, but it's like it makes more sense when you read the book. Trust me. So they get magic powers from a bird. He kills one of these birds, takes it back, gets his magical powers, but it's in his necklace. He's not attuned yet, so he can't use them yet. And he doesn't really use them until very late in the book. But, so his village gets ransacked by, yes, I know, oh, my village got raided. It's very, very traditional opening. But this time it's different because he gets kidnapped by soldiers from Thrage, the nation next door. Yes, that name is inspired by Thrace, a ancient Roman province. And so he's brought over as a slave, forced to fight in slave fights, and then leaves. Like, he runs away. He gets captured. He's forced to fight in the war against Braum now. So, and he has a friend. He wants to run away, or he wants to kill people. He's kind of an impulsive guy. I probably wouldn't like him if I met him in real life, this Kiersey, but he's interesting enough to read. And his friend Dord actually has his head screwed on straight, so he doesn't want to do all the stupid things Kiersey wants to do, and that creates a lot of conflict. And essentially they're forced to fight against their own home nation until it just all gets to be too much. And I won't explain everything that happens because I am planning to publish this story at some point. Anytime I say I finished a novel, everybody's like, when is it getting published? Like, it's the first question they ask. Brandon Sanderson mentioned this, and people can't be that immediate about it. Nope. That is like, it's like, awesome. When are you getting it published? It's not even, are you getting it published? When are you getting it published? I'm sure if I wasn't actually planning on getting it published, I would be very annoyed. Personally, I'm not sending it out to publishers currently. I'm going to wait until I've finished the novel that I'm currently working on, which is a thriller, because I figured I might as well make sure that I'm better at fantasy than at thriller before I stick with fantasy, because my style is a lot like a thriller, so I figured I'd try it out. But I'm going to wait until I'm done with the novel that I'm currently working on, and then I'm going to go back and revise Stormhawk a second time, because I've already revised it once. I'm going to do it again, Then I'm going to send it to publishers. Maybe even at the same time as my second novel, though probably before. I don't actually expect it to get published, or at least not published anywhere like serious high level, since it is a first novel. I've been writing for 6 years. I've been writing since I was 10 years old. So I have a lot of experience writing stories. But up until writing Stormhawk, the longest things I'd ever written were 2 novellas. And for novellas, they weren't long. And just during writing Stormhawk, while writing Stormhawk, it was just a huge jump. Even like somewhere in the middle of while I was writing it, very quick, very large jump in my writing skill. So that by the time I finished, the stuff at the end was way better than the stuff at the beginning. So I had to go back and change everything, especially since I changed the plot in major ways halfway through to make it work better. So this idea was like 5 ideas that finally became one idea at the end. What I'm really glad about having finished a novel is that whenever I started an idea, I was thinking in the back of my mind, who am I kidding? Like, I'm not actually going to finish this. Because every single time I started a novel, I realized halfway through, like not even halfway through, more like a quarter of the way through, well, damn, this is just absolute crap. And I'll switch to a better idea. Damn, this is absolute crap. I'll switch to a better idea. And that just kept happening and happening and happening, and I was gaining experience incrementally, but I'd never actually finished anything. I didn't have any novels to show for all of my attempts. And with Stormhawk, I just decided, I don't care how crappy this thing is. I don't care how damn terrible this story turns out to be. I'm finishing writing this. And I did change the idea itself in major ways, but I didn't actually jump to a different idea. So at least now I can prove I can actually stick with a novel. And I think as well, the experience of having written something this large, this long scale, by leaps and bounds longer than anything I'd ever written. At the end, I think it has like 90,000 words in it. That, like, but up until then, the longest thing I'd ever written was like about 20,000. About, not even quite. So, by leaps and bounds, the longest thing I've ever written really gave me a sense of how plotting works for longer stories. Like, the amount of scenes you need, how many elements in each scene to get a certain length. You know, you shouldn't quite be writing a story just like adding scenes just to fill in time. But, you know, I understand more now what I'm working with, what kind of length of a story I'm trying to hit, how many elements and how quickly I need to move through them to get there in that time, which is helpful now that I'm beginning, like I've done a lot of plotting for and have begun writing my thriller idea, but is also helpful just with coming up with story ideas in general. I found that after that humongous jump in writing skill that I had while writing Stormhawk, which, like, my dialogue went from being the worst part of my writing to the best. That's not hyperbole. The best part of my writing now is my dialogue, and it used to be unreadable, disgusting. You know, when I was writing The Legion, I was just trying too damn hard to be Tolkien. I'll be honest, I was just trying too hard to be Tolkien. But after that jump in skill, and I honestly don't know where it's from, now there's a lot more ideas that I have for books, and the ideas that I do have, I can take the overall idea that I had and be like, oh, well, that means now I gotta have this scene would be best to add here. You know, I found that it's very helpful in setting up the structure, setting up the skeleton so I can fill in the guts. More of an aside, really, here. But I honestly expected finishing my first full novel to be a huge emotional experience, like a milestone in my life. And it is, to an extent, a milestone. It's probably the biggest achievement I currently have in my life. I don't know what that says about my life, but there it is. But I just kind of felt like, okay, that's done. Now what am I gonna do? It wasn't like my parents. I honestly think that they were more emotional about it than I was. And then I moved to a different fantasy novel set in the same world, following one of the characters that was in Stormhawk, who's actually set up as kind of an antagonist in Stormhawk. I don't think he's a bad guy exactly. He's just like, his goals are very different from the main character's goals, but they don't really have much direct conflict. But that idea, I figured, well, if Stormhawk doesn't get published, then this one definitely can't be published, because this one basically requires that somebody have read Stormhawk for it to make sense. So I switched to a different fantasy novel. Then I had a really good idea for a thriller. And I figured, well, first of all, I might as well try out thriller, just to know what I'm better at. Second of all, easier to finish faster, easier to revise faster, easier to publish faster than a fantasy novel. Especially if it's unique, because there aren't that many unique thrillers out there, to be honest. A lot of thrillers are very same old, same old. Like, we've read about enough grizzled detectives and secret agents at this point. So, essentially, to sum up my future plans at this point, I'm going to take the skills that, like, this writing skill to this writing skill, that I built during writing Stormhawk, and apply them to outlining and then jumping into the actual writing, which I will probably do at the same time. I tend to do both at once, jump between them, of this thriller. And it's going to be a pretty dialogue-y story, which I found my stories now tend to be after I wrote Stormhawk, since now I'm just so much better at it that play to your strengths, I guess. Then after I finish that, and hopefully after I can get as many people as possible to read Stormhawk, I will then go back and edit Stormhawk and make it as spick and spam as possible. Then I'll send Stormhawk out to publishers. Probably not get published. I'm not expecting to. Most writers don't publish the first novel they ever write. Then go back to the thriller and edit the thriller a bunch, and then do the same with the thriller, which will probably have a much better chance of getting published. It's a better idea to begin with, and in a much more commonly published genre, which I know there's more competition, but less unique competition. I probably won't self-publish. A lot of people have told me, well, are you going to... If you can't get published by a publisher, you can self-publish. Maybe on, like, Kindle or Amazon as an ebook. But even then, it's honestly unlikely. I'm not going to build a self-publishing brand. Because in the future, I'm going to be an author who also works in law enforcement. So I'm not going to have a ton of time to run my own business, market myself, this and that. I'm just going to write as a hobby, send it out, and then make money from it. And if that means that my earlier works don't end up getting published, I'm all right with that. But, and this is a big but, I do need reviews on the writing that I create. So, if you're in the mood for something to read, I can't, like, put the link in the description, because then if I try and send it to a publisher, then they're going to be very, very angry at me, because I've technically already self-published it, and people can just get it from my YouTube. So I can't do that. But if you comment on this video that you would like to read Stormhawk, see what it's about, and then give me your feedback through a Google form that I've created, then I can share it with you directly in such a way that you can't share it with other people. Sorry, but them's the rules. So, if you're interested in that, let me know below.